Hey guys, so today I'm doing my December wrap up, so I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read throughout the month of December, and there were some really good ones this month, but of course I'm going to be starting as usual with my least favourite book that I read for the month, so my lowest star rating, which was 2 stars, and that was for Mean Girls, a novel by Nicole Osto. This, as you can probably guess, is basically just a novelized version of the movie Mean Girls. I love the movie Mean Girls, it's amazing, one of my all-time favourite movies. This book pretty much followed the script of the movie just about word for word. There were sometimes the occasional like slight differences in dialogue and things like that, and that really annoyed the heck out of me just because I know the movie so well, I've seen it so many times. There were also a few different additions to this book. There were some extra things that were added in. Most of them, to be honest, were really dumb. Like there was a bit of a gimmick that after Regina's recovery, she had to eat calcium bars in order to like gain back the weight that she lost while she was in hospital or something, and that whole thing was just really dumb because it was supposed to be like, haha, after all of that she has to eat calcium bars, and it just wasn't funny. There were some additions though that I really enjoyed. There was a lot more about Taylor Waddell and Jason and Chang Pak as well, like text messages between them, and I really enjoyed that. I thought it was cool to see like more of those minor characters that you don't get to see much of in the movie, so that was really good. The book uses multiple points of view, which unfortunately wasn't done well at all. All of the different points of view sounded exactly the same, like they all just sounded like Katie, which when you come to characters like Regina and Janice, like they're so distinct that you would think they would have a really distinct voice, so it was disappointing that they didn't and that wasn't done well. The one character I will say though that had a really distinctive voice and I thought was done perfectly, like it sounded exactly like her, was Gretchen. They just nailed Gretchen's character spot on. Her point of view sections were really good, and they just captured her like hyper intensity really well. Unfortunately, the writing itself was generally quite bad as well. The word choice was interesting in places. You know how there's like different words you can use for said? Sometimes they would use one that just seemed really inappropriate for the circumstances. Like there was a lot of times when it would say you know, so and so snapped instead of said, and the word snapped just was completely like wrong in the context. Overall it was pretty bad. Like it's probably one of the worst written books that I've come across, so definitely worthy of its 2-star rating. I had no 3-star reads throughout the month of December, so moving straight on to my 4 stars, of which there were quite a few, and they were all really good. So to start with, I read the first 3 issues of the Runaways comic series, which has been written by Rainbow Rowell. This is a series that I think has been around for a long time. It was done by like different writers in the past, and Rainbow Rowell has been doing like the new series. Basically it's about a bunch of kids who have different powers, and they are known as the Runaways because they like fought against their evil parents and ran away together. So this picks up where previous series of Runaways have left off. I never read the old ones, but it didn't take me too much to catch up with what was going on with these. Like you can kind of jump straight into it. Rainbow Rowell's humour definitely comes through, which is really what makes these for me. You can just like hear her humour in them. They're super short obviously because they're just like singular issues, and isn't it funny that these came out like they come out 1 month at a time. I've got a subscription, but they all like arrived around the end of November, start of December. I'm enjoying these. I really like the art in them. They're really cool, so if you've been thinking about checking them out, I definitely think it's worth it. My next 4-star read was The Legacy of Guilt, A Life of Thomas Kendall by Judith Binney. This was a book that I had to read for uni. I had to like read and review it for a history paper. This is about a missionary called Thomas Kendall, who was one of the first missionaries to come to New Zealand, and it kind of just is his biography, so it goes through his whole life. It was really interesting. I just didn't like love it because I had to analyze it, which means I was writing notes the whole time, and I hate writing notes while I'm reading. It's something that I basically never do. In the past I've done it like a couple times when I knew that I wanted to review a book, but now I try not to do it at all costs because I just hate like reading a page and you get to a really good bit and then you're like, okay, I have to stop to like write this down. I hate it. So I didn't really enjoy the whole process of reading that book, but it was a really good book. The next 4-star read for me this month was Cinder by Marissa Meyer. This is the first book in the Lunar Chronicles series, and this is one that I've been wanting to read for like the last couple years. So I was super excited to read this month, and this one really pleasantly surprised me. You guys have probably heard about it before, and it's one that is just kind of way overhyped. It's basically a Cinderella retelling. So the main girl in it, called Cinder, is a cyborg. It's like a sci-fi version of Cinderella. Even though it's classed as like sci-fi, to me I got really dystopian kind of vibes from it. So I think if you like things like The Hunger Games and books like that, I think you'll really enjoy this one as well. The next 4-star read that I had this month was Crimson Exchange by Ella Fleming Christie. Ella is a fellow New Zealand booktuber. She lives in Auckland, and I consider her one of my like booktube friends. I love her videos and everything so much, so I'll link her channel down below as well as this short story. She wrote this, I believe, for like a uni thing she was doing because she's studying creative writing, and she published it on Kindle or Amazon or however that works. I don't really know how it works, but basically you can buy this for only like $1-ish. I think it's just over $1, and highly recommend, totally worth it. This was my favorite of my 4-star reads that I had this month. It was really, really good. I don't want to go into what it's about too much because obviously with short stories you don't want to like give too much away, but just to give you like a vague explanation of what it's about a girl who is an assassin, and she's going to get revenge and kill someone because she's an assassin, that's what they do. But it's kind of like a vengeance killing for her as well. Different mysterious things kind of fall together throughout this story. It's super, super dark, super, super creepy, way darker than I thought it would be. It just kind of got darker and darker as it went on, but I really love that about it. Little minor editing issues aside, this was an amazing short story and definitely worth checking out if you think it sounds like something that you're into. I know this will appeal to a lot of YA readers because it's just amazing. Highly recommend. And I'm really, really hoping Ella can shed some light on this, that this is like going to be part of a bigger book or like a series or something that she's working on, because as a standalone story it was awesome, but I want to know more so badly. There's like things that I want to know about these characters. Like I want to know what happens afterwards, I want to know what happened before this, and I just hope that it's like part of a series or something. So now moving on to my couple of 5-star reads for the month. There were 2 of them. The first one is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This one I've been wanting to read for the longest time. It's one that's on like the Rory Gilmore book list, as well as just being a super famous classic. This is a semi-autobiographical book. It's based quite closely on Sylvia Plath's own life, and I think around like a week after this was published, Sylvia Plath ended her own life. Pretty much it starts off, she is in New York. She won like some kind of scholarship to be like assistant or like shadow a fashion magazine editor, but she pretty much spirals into depression. She doesn't really want to do anything as a result of clinical depression, which is something that perhaps wasn't very well recognized at the time. She ends up in, you know, asylums and things like that and trying to like find treatment, but it's not something obviously that was dealt with very well at the time. It was when they were using like electric shock therapy and things like that. Initially this one reminded me a lot of Catcher in the Rye just because it's set in New York, and it's definitely, the whole book in general is written in the same sort of style. So to be honest, if you didn't like Catcher in the Rye, you're probably not going to like this one either, because it doesn't have much of a plot to it. Like there's a lot of things that happen in her life that get brought up, but it's not like a straightforward like chronological plot with like a story arc or anything like that whatsoever. The same way that Catcher in the Rye doesn't have that kind of story arc. It's kind of just him wandering around and giving you an insight into like his state of mind. It's the same kind of thing. And it's interesting to me that this reminded me so much of The Catcher in the Rye because it was published around 12 years after The Catcher in the Rye, and I wonder whether Sylvia Plath was influenced by that book at all, that deals with, especially at the beginning, like a kind of loss of innocence and a bit of disillusionment with the world. She kind of just completely loses her faith in like everything and just sees the world as like a really bad negative place, which is I guess a common state of mind when you're dealing with depression. Even though these are things she's not necessarily going through in this book, she is thinking about marriage and motherhood and sex and having a career and like all of these things in terms of dealing with them as a woman. Because she is dealing with depression throughout this book, it's very, very dark and very, very cynical. There's no hope in this book. I would say that it's one to definitely only read if you're in a really good place. I'm throwing out a trigger warning for obviously depression like I mentioned, but suicide as well. It goes into some quite graphic detail about her own suicidal thoughts. The writing itself is the thing I loved most about it. It's just really, really beautifully written, like very poetic. There were a lot of quotes that really resonated with me personally, and I just think it's a really powerful book overall. It's just obviously very dark, considering especially the circumstances of like the author's own life. To end this video on a lighter note, my other 5-star read for the month was Emma by Jane Austen. This is a classic. Obviously, this is the second Jane Austen book that I've ever read, and I adored it. Complete opposite to The Bell Jar. It's super lighthearted and like a fluffy classic to read. It's what the movie Clueless was loosely based on. Obviously, Clueless takes place in like, well, it was made in the 90s and it's set in like 90s LA, so it's completely different in that respect, but they pull kind of plot points out of this book for that movie, and it's super awesome. So if you like the movie Clueless, I think you'll really enjoy reading this. It really contributed to my reading experience because I was reading this picking out like who was who in the Clueless world as well. There is so much like almost trashy kind of drama in this book. It's all about different romances that are happening and different like interpersonal dramas, girls not liking each other, you know, because they're jealous of each other or whatever. And I think Austen, especially in this book, has a real knack for writing incredible unlikable characters. I think to be able to write unlikable characters well in a way that you still want to know about them and you're still interested in reading about them, but you still like dislike them passionately, I think that takes real skill, and Jane Austen definitely does that in this book. For example, there's this character called Miss Bates who just never shuts up. She like talks so much and all the other characters really don't like her for it. Not that they'd say it to her face, but she just doesn't stop talking, and that like drives you crazy, but it's like the book is still flowing, which is really amazing. And I loved the character Knightley. I think he was my favorite, and also Frank I thought was done really well, and overall I just really loved this book. It was so much fun. So those are all of the books that I read this month. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of them, what you thought of them, or if any of these sound like books that you want to pick up. And yeah, that's it for now. If you want to keep up with what I'm reading all of the time, you can go friend me on Goodreads if you like, which I will link down below, as well as my Twitter and Instagram. And yeah, thanks for watching this. I'll see you guys with another video in a couple days. Bye.